I'm Not Sure How to Fix This, a podcast from Divine by Design. You can't seem to get over the lingering feeling of tightness in your throat, soldiering on towards commitments that seem to consume the hours of your day and leave you with only the brief twilight that eventually ends in pitch black and wishful thinking. And you're tired deep down in your bones because you've been spending all of your energy trying to navigate the microaggressions, indifference, and volatility that seems to be a byproduct of the color of your skin. You try to sleep, but when you do, your dreams are full of the nightmares that seem to echo the turbulent reality you face every day. And before you know it, the sun comes up and it's time to head out into the world again. Because even when you mention it to the people around you, they would rather not hear about it. So you swallow down that tightness in your throat and ask yourself, am I overreacting? Am I living in the same world as everyone else? Because everyone seems to believe that there's nothing standing in the way of me living my best life. And if that's the case, have I just not been trying hard enough? Today we're talking to Victoria Rogers, a consultant with Alphabet with ties to the Brooklyn Museum in New York and the Studio Museum in Harlem, about her thesis work entitled Black Noise, Dream the Revolution. We explore the sleep gap between people of color, the direct correlation between health disparities and loss of sleep, and the implications of creativity in a world where whiteness is the foundation of thought through which we build our perspective of reality. Heavy, I know. Let's dive right in.
Can I keep? Do you mind if I record us?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm not able to keep up right now.
Yeah, especially when you get when we really start talking, it's like, yeah, we've known you're not the first person to say that. So I was like, I need to record you now.
Yeah, I know. I got nervous.
So, literally, we can bounce around any of those points in your board, and I can weigh in on each of them. But particularly, I want to talk about this notion of having good dreams and bad dreams, and like the idea of like having nightmares, and how do we move ourselves to a point where we're not having nightmares, where instead of having bad dreams, we're having good dreams, right? Like, I think that the terminology of good dreams and bad dreams is really limiting. I think I'm using the word think, but what I found in my studies is that the nature of dreaming in the unconscious mind, especially when it comes to nightmares, and we'll talk about nightmares, I guess, a little bit, just because African Americans seem to be disproportionately affected by like everything all the time.
By raindrops, right?
By everything all the time.
Yeah.
Right? So, I think that when we start to put those connotations of like you can have good dreams, or you can have bad dreams, or you can have nightmares, right? Like we really put ourselves in a position of like being combative and being at odds with an energy that's like inherently a part of our psyche, our spirituality, you know what I mean? And how just on not even on a metaphysical level or a spiritual level, but just on a physical level, how our bodies are operating as basic processes, you know what I mean, to clear out our minds and to keep us, to keep the meat puppet functioning. So, the best example of what I found when it comes to nightmares is that nightmares kind of function as kind of a spiritual or a subconscious shout, you know what I mean, from the psyche. I think that nightmares are jarring because they have to be, because when we're not paying attention to the parts of our lives and of our emotional state that need just time and space to breathe. Obviously you have to turn up the volume. You know, if we're distracted with speaking to 50 other people in the room, you know, the little child that you push off in the corner is going to have to scream in order to be heard. And it's kind of telling that when we find ourselves jarred by these experiences, you know, we label them bad, we label them negative, and we say, how can we change this to something else, right? Like, I don't feel that the process of transmuting that energy or changing that energy into something positive is necessarily something that we have to actively be seeking. Like, we want to change bad into good. I feel, and I've found that, you know, by playing the awareness game, you know, acknowledging these energies when they come into our space, you know, being aware enough to be calm and to allow them to exist, you know, with a lot less judgment, not to try to figure them out, you know, but just to let the gorilla beat his chest a little bit. What we find is that that energy naturally untangles itself, you know what I mean? Though, and puts itself back into alignment, or, you know, in the idea of like sound vibration in the mind, because you're interested in how sound affects dreams. I think it's about, you know, incoherent waves, and, you know, like waves that are in dissonance and waves that are coherent, right? And studies have shown, and I'm assuming I'm gonna just talk as though we already know this, right? But if I say something that, you know, you need a reference point for, or whatnot, please stop me.
Okay.
Was that okay? You need me to stop real quick, or we?
No. I'm curious what you're going to say next about sound vibrations.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. So, you know, vibrations, nightmares, transmuting that energy into something usable, right? Like, when we're experiencing those nightmares, if we allow the energy to unravel itself naturally, it pushes itself back into a coherent state. It's only when we create roadblocks for thought processes and feelings and emotions, right? When we don't allow them time and space, when that energy gets jammed up, that it becomes, you know, dissonance, right? You can look at studies of like the difference between when someone that is dreaming or someone that is like meditating has coherent brainwave function, which usually comes from, you know, emotions like compassion and gratitude and patience, and, you know, when our body is vibrating coherently, right? And then when we have base emotions, right, which are meant to kind of jar us and move us and stimulate our body into instinctive motion, right? And we see correspondence between, like, you know, anger, frustration, sometimes heightened sexuality, but sexual energy goes both ways. So, like, I think that, you know, the way that our brains work with coherent waves and incoherent waves is indicative of how you can use sounds that, you know, are designed to be coherent, you know, melodies, rhythm, humming, vibrations, and my sister can speak to this a little more than me, and how those can, you know, affect the way that our body, you know, which is really this huge sensory organ, right, is encountering vibrations, right? And I think that when you fill the body space with any vibration, it usually moves towards coherency again, unless there are choke points in the body. And that's a very important distinction, because you can do all of the, you know, singing bowl treatments, vibration therapy that you want, but if you're not in a position where these unconscious elements, you're going to give these unconscious elements space to exist in your space, right? You're not going to dissociate them. All of those vibrations, even though they can be coherent when they come into your, you know, bioelectrical field, so to speak, if they're not able to move past a point, it's always going to equal dissonance, as, you know, as it hits those choke points. Sis.
We always speak with similar mind, but that's because we always speak to each other a lot. Along the same length. I have notes here. But along those same lines, and to just kind of dovetail on what Wolf shared, yes, I kind of had an internal visceral reaction to the idea that nightmares are something that you need to get rid of. Understanding, it definitely wasn't surprising that people of color have more occurrences of nightmares, but just going to throw out there, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a correlation in that maybe there's increased nightmares because there's a decrease in opportunities to integrate what it is being experienced, right? And so it ends up presenting itself subconsciously because it doesn't have any other time or opportunity to do so. And to approach the idea that what we need to do is to get rid of that aspect of nightmares so they don't occur as much worries me, because it means that the integration, the experiences, whether it's your experiences or ancestral trauma or whatever is coming up, that it becomes something that doesn't have an outlet for expression. It becomes something that you want to mute and you want to, create. It's kind of like creating a choke point, actually, purposefully, right. But it didn't surprise me. I always had this thought where it's like, how soon can you get the workforce back out working? Like, you don't need them. Make sure they have a good night's sleep so they can get up with the sun and keep working, right? And I'll just throw out there too, that's one of the things that shifted for a lot of people when COVID hit and we were in lockdown because we couldn't get out, right? There wasn't as many distractions. We started paying attention to what was coming up at a subconscious level. And a lot of times, even when we wanted to be distracted, we couldn't be in the way that we were before. So there's that point. But then the other interesting thing too, and something that I kind of struggle with, and Wolf kind of started bringing up the point. I get it. I get the idea of, two points actually. I'm interested, there was a concept that you shared, and I don't know if it's Rima's work or Rena's work. I might have spelled her name wrong, about the sounds of sleep. And the idea that she was tying certain sounds into places that people were dreaming. I'm wondering about her process. The reason I'm asking that is because when my brothers and sisters and I shared our dreaming experiences growing up, the places that we dreamed may look different, but they all have similar themes. And we built amongst each other a nomenclature so that when we start talking about middle world, what did you dream last night? I spent a lot of time up in the middle world. So a lot of our dreaming was in an inner city, setting. It may not have even felt like any city we've ever been in, but lots of concrete, lots of stairs and structures and buildings, versus dreamings that we have that may take place completely underwater. That's, it's different, types of dreamscapes. And Wolf is actually building a map of the common places that we recognize when we start speaking about it's like a map of our dreaming locations. And so I'm almost interested to see if she has a sound for the places that she's been going to, because sometimes places have colors, sometimes they have similar characters, for example, you rarely encounter zombies outside of, or we rarely encounter an imagery of zombies outside of settings that are also in cities, right? Have you heard a lot of people mentioning having zombie dreams that are not in places that have like human structures around it? So there's certain different areas that you go to dreamscape wise also have a feel or a taste or a texture for it, to the point of where you can map out some of the places you've been. And so it struck me, I wonder if she's picking up a sound.
Wait, but who? I'm trying to remember I know I went through.
I think her name, she had a picture in the background. She had dreads. She was on stage. There was it was the very last one that you showed us. It was like an ethereal curtain was behind her. I think her name was Rena, Rena or Rema. Her first
She
name.
was making music that was based on sounds of dreaming, but not necessarily inviting people to sleep. Those were your words?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
The person I just learned about. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that intrigued me because there are, I have noticed that when I'm choosing to use a method of intonation before I go to bed. So there is a specific topic or intention that I want to focus on in my dreamscape. And as I'm meditating on that, I tie into that the sound and the rhythm and the intonation that comes up. I either find myself humming or singing or just letting sound become. It helps direct what my dreamscape plays out, to be. And so that when you said that, I was like, that I've never tried instruments because I don't consider myself, me and instruments, I don't take care of them very well. Like practically speaking, I've tried guitar and I'm like, my fingers just aren't doing what I want them to do. But if I let my, lay down and let my breathing come through and let my very lungs and my very ribs become the instrument that I'm using, let my body start literally vibrating and resonating and tying that to the intentionality of what it is I'm seeking to dream, I found it to be really effective. Sorry, Wolf, go ahead. I think I cut you off.
No, you're good. We're not cutting off. We're just we're doing that thing we do. So just to pivot a little back to sound, right? I can tell you that my findings and my studies have been that there are certain sounds of certain instruments that take you in certain directions. So I want to kind of tie into what you were saying, sis. So for this example, let's talk about the middle world, right? And these are three terms, right? Just so that we're all on the same page when we can have this conversation, right? So when you're moving through the middle world, yes, usually you're moving in a space that is urban or very earthly. And what I mean by that is that the middle world is kind of the space where people will have out of body experiences. You are not necessarily in your flesh, but you are still interacting with this kind of corporeal plane, right? These reference points. So we refer to that as middle world. Upper world is the space of like higher archetypes, where we are encountering sights and sounds and things and shapes that mean things to us, right? Like, so this is the realm of the abstract, of the sometimes deliberately ambiguous. And then there's the lower world, and the lower world being where a lot of people encounter very visceral, sometimes ancestral energy, a lot of times energy that is very rooted in, animal archetypes, because those are common reference points for us, etc. Okay. So the reason I bring that up is because what I found is that so there are studies on frequency modulation when beating a drum, right? That shows that the tempo that most shamanic practitioners use instinctively to beat their drum to induce a state of trance is very closely aligned to the heartbeat of a human being, which is only a few, I think, decibels above the frequency that our planet's core vibrates at. So it's very interesting, because usually when shamanic practitioners, practitioners of like Sufi mysticism or Wicca or whatnot, are inducing these trance states, you find, interestingly enough, that a lot of times they're dealing with the imagery in their meditations and in their dreams of animal spirits, plant spirits, right? Which are indicative of the lower world, are indicative of our reference point here. I think that when we get into a lot of like beta frequencies, there are lots of tracks that you can find that's like, frequencies specifically to activate like the theta wave, of your brain when you're sleeping. When you get into those type of frequencies, which are very close to humming, right? It's when you get the you end up in the middle world a lot. You end up kind of having these feelings of lightness, of lifting, of separating from your physical body, not too far removed. And there is, there's some evidence that would, and I guess I can only speak to my personal experience on this. I'll have to look at my notes, but I find that instruments that are like wind based or string based, like the violin, usually kind of put you into a space where people are spending more time in the upper world. They're spending time with archetypes. This is my grandfather, or this is a teacher, a mentor that I'm encountering in my space. And I actually use those type of distinctions when I am intentionally traveling. So like I dream every night pretty much, right? Everybody dreams every night. That's a misnomer. We don't always remember it. So, I remember my dreams pretty much every night, but I am not always actively directing my dreams. But when I decide to, if, I have a particular stress or a particular struggle or trauma that I'm trying to, integrate, I will meditate on very heavily which direction do I need to go. Like, am I looking for advice and guidance? Am I trying to find information outside of my sphere, which is the upper world, where I need to find a mentor? Am I trying, to ground myself for dealing with, some of the issues of my day-to-day grind, in which case, potentially the middle world. I almost never intentionally want to move through the middle world. That's a whole nother conversation. Or if, I'm in a position where I am looking for kind of very base, instinctual feelings and emotion, or, power to manifest or encourage myself into moving in a certain direction, it's the lower world. It's the world of, hey, forget about the monkey words. This is all about the sound and the feel and the smell and the move, right? And I think moving through the lower world using drum bass to send myself into a dreaming state is a good place to put myself when I want to wake up in the morning and go, let me hit the ground running and get this thing that I want.
We've been discussing the sleep gap for people of color with Victoria Rogers. If what you're hearing resonates with you and you want to learn more, follow us on social media or head to www.divinebydesign.org to join one of our workshops, find dream coaching, participate in free Zoom events, and keep your eyes peeled for links to Victoria Rogers' work and other resources mentioned in the show. Here we go.
Yeah, wow. I mean, that's like amazing knowledge. And I'm curious if you think, I know you said for the upper world, it was an example that you felt like was one just driven from your own experience. But I guess I'm curious about if at least for the others, it feels like a collective experience, like that is a trend that is about that many people might have that same.
Okay. Yeah. Don't. So the only reason I said I had to say from my experience is because I always say that when I cannot give you all of the references. I haven't done enough research in the upper world to say, without a doubt, based on these experiences, based on, my readings and my findings and my experimentation, which I've documented, I can tell you this. So I can tell you about the lower world and the middle world. Everybody's moved through the upper world, but I don't have enough documentation for me to say.
I appreciate that. That's so cool. I think that it would be a big win for me if I was able to navigate how to create a set of sounds that might and be able to translate what you might be able to get by listening. If I could find a way to talk about that, so that someone on the other side who's a novice or noob could say, I'm going to try this one based on where I am.
Yeah.
Today.
I think that so I'm curious about how you're moving dreaming and your methodology, right? Because it's one thing for you to find these resources and to talk to people like us and things like that. But I think that your thesis is really going to kind of explode, not in a bad way explode, but like, really kind of blow up. If you find some of these techniques that you think could kind of resonate and you experiment with them yourself, right? I can tell you about, a few very, very cheap, herbs, that will help to stimulate your dreaming just, and that's like the smell, the aroma. But, for example, before we were speaking, I was burning some mugwort, right? And my sister will shake her head at mugwort. She goes too deep when, when mugwort's burned. But, you know, um, you know, energetically, shamanically, um, these smells, these aromas, they have effects on the human body, right? Like we understand that smell is very closely tied to memory, right? And there's enough documentation between the different practitioners of, cultural traditions throughout the world for us to understand that, like, Blue Lotus, Blue Lotus will send you there, or African Dream Root, or Mugwort.
I will just say, as someone who's married to an herbalist, that you want to make sure that it's mugwort before you smoke it. Well,
I mean, it needs to be dried. You know what I mean? But the whole point is that of me like bringing up that like aroma element is that, like, I think that writing about it is one thing, but if you want to take a trip to the lower world, order some mugwort online, some dried mugwort, burn it to get the aroma in your house, and play a drumming track. Do that for a couple days.
But see, and I know, but it's different though, because so then what you make me think of too, Wolf, is how I'm just gonna go out and say that a lot of the times women of color and men of color have a different it's a different experience. One of the reasons I just almost never and for me, when like a herbal aid is tea for me. Certain types of teas, tea that might have valerian, or tea that might have no, not even tea. It was like a topical rub for arnica. I had a burn, and my husband, who is basically Legolas from Lord of the Rings, gave me arnica rub, and it felt like my reaction to it was such that I was hearing a melody in my head, and I was seeing like flashes of a picture. I didn't know what arnica, the plant, looked like, and I was describing to him what was flashing in my head, and he's like, why are you talking about arnica? And I was like, okay, I don't need I don't need any aid. So for me, if I want to go deep, then what I do is I focus my intentionality during, for example, either if a full moon is around, or if I'm about to go my period. Simple as that. And it's a time when I drink more water. Water in general holds memory, spiritually, energetically. we can jump down that too. But just having the intentionality and paying attention to what time of the month it is can change the type of dreams you have. I'm not even sure if that comes up. People say that, things are strange during a full moon. Sometimes just paying attention to what's happening during which time of the month or time of year is enough. Sorry, I was just.
No, please.
No, I have other
because what you're going into also feeds back, and I want to tie that back into
No, please do. Go
topic
ahead.
About vibration and sound, right?
No, that's where I was going. So stop it. Okay, go. You go.
Right, because
it's so funny.
Because all right, so let's look at the sensory organ that is the human being, right? Just the basic stuff, the grade school stuff, bioelectrical conductor, primarily made of water, all these things that make us a very good receptor, right? And then when you talk about sound, right, one of the evidence points that you can use kind of validate the effects that sound has on the dream or has on a dream, is to take that and kind of blow it up past our planet, right? To the idea, right, that every celestial body, whether it is, it's like planets, comets, stars, pulsars, and things like that, we already understand and can measure, right? We can measure the fact that these different bodies are creating waves of energy or waves of sound, radio waves, right? Like we don't actually see that pulsar out there, we hear it, right? Like, and that's how our instruments pick up on it. And so when you think about what happens when you play sound, over water, is that like you create these ripples, right? And those ripples are going to affect that body of water. So it's very interesting, right? That to think about how not just women, but specifically, let's talk about women because there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of water energy tied to the way that you move, sis, and the fact that when the moon shifts, into alignment and it's in a position where it pulls more on the human body, right? Like, studies have shown that people are more irritable, more aware, during full moons, right? And then if you tie that with this massive shift of water and chemicals and sodium in a female's body each month, you know what I mean? That changes the level of chemicals in her body. You know what I mean? It's very, it's a very curious thing to think about how changing up the formula of that water compound that is particularly the female body, right? Can really be affected by these different vibrations that are even happening on a celestial or cosmic level. So, what does that potentially tell us, or what does that hint to, as far as when we create sound intentionally in close proximity to a person?
Right. Yeah.
Then you get into collective dreaming and collective, right? Because if we're sharing vibrations and waves and energy, that's then we start talking, and then suddenly we're sharing archetypes and imagery, and especially if there's time that extends over that and it becomes repetitious and it becomes a part of the nomenclature of a culture, then you can end up with it being more likely that you have collective dreaming for certain spaces. I think that's one of the reasons we share. It's so important, we think, to create communities of dreamers, or just people who are talking. That was the thing that we had. That was, it wasn't my a friend of mine was like, she was trying to become, to get more lucid, to have more lucid dreaming. And then she was just like, I just can't do it. You guys just have the gift and it's just a natural thing. And I was like, no, the gift was that we had community. It was something that it was a part of our upbringing, that we were able to talk about it openly. It became a part of us culturally. There wasn't a stigmatization of it amongst each other. We were able to share common spaces, common themes, common imagery that was coming up, and then be able to process things quicker because we started communally dreaming because we had that connection. And so, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's something that happens a lot in families. Maybe it's just something families don't talk about. Yeah. Sorry,
I was going to say, it's really interesting. I mean, there's so many valuable insights here, but I think something that for me is just like a game-changing one that's so important is, and maybe I haven't resolved it yet, but I've been thinking as you were talking about the hesitancy around trying to get rid of nightmares or solve nightmares or something, like, anything that's about sort of vanquishing them, that maybe what the intervention is more around integration, or supporting integration, or providing space for it, or encouraging it, or maybe that's instead the direction of it. And to me, it feels like the community-based part is probably such an important part of supporting that. And then maybe, I think part of why I was thinking about music versus something like smell is that I think they're really accessible not music, but sound, I should say. they're really accessible ways to disseminate it, and it can be free, and it can be like you can kind of sort of quickly get it to many people. And I was curious about experimenting in that way. And then, I think so often, like even the communal experience of like going to a party and all listening to the same DJ and like feel like that is a really like human experience. Maybe not so much now in COVID, but we've all had that. And so it felt like for someone who might not be thinking this way, there's an entry point there maybe around collective experience through sound that people are so used to kind of gathering around in a way that I think smell.
So I think you hit the nail right on the head, right? Like, I think that when we look at, the people that are, affected most by, nightmares and night terrors and all, and that type of energy, right? And we see that they are usually people, of minority descent. There is also this really interesting avenue because, music and sound is already used as a method of catharsis within these communities. Like, what we are listening to primarily is not necessarily geared specifically towards healing, but there's something about, the beat and the rhythm and the sound that has always been part of the African American culture and how we, deal with the fact that like there was a lynching the other day.
And so I know that what was frustrating me a lot when I would look into sound to help with sleep, because there's not a lot of sound to help with dreaming. There's sound to help with sleep. Is that it was something to listen to that was kind of trying to direct me as to where it wanted me to go. And I could not get over waking up. And sometimes it was successful, sometimes it wasn't, but I would wake up feeling like I hadn't gone where I needed to. It worked, I think, like the tones and the, the bells of the drums, they did what they were supposed to. But where I needed to go, that moon cycle, I have not yet gone to. And so that energy still needs to be expressed and to come out. And so it was really interesting because I know that, especially in 2020, I had a lot of friends that were unlearning whiteness. And there was that shift. I didn't mean to laugh. To the friends that they had that were people of color. And they're like, okay, now the mic is yours. I'm not going to say anything. I'm here to listen. It's your turn to talk. And what I realized is that a lot of the times, the people of color they were turning to either didn't know what to say, or the first sound that came out of their mouth wasn't words. Sometimes it was tears. Sometimes it was yelling. Sometimes it was frustration. Sometimes it was moans. And sometimes it wasn't space for that. It was, well, we gave them an opportunity to kind of speak up, and it didn't really make sense. And it's like, like, can we have the expression as part of the healing, and that it doesn't always have to fit in these well-defined boxes, and be, because at the end of the day, we all want to sleep our 8 hours to work the most during the time that we're awake. I am trying not to. I have an opportunity to heal what's in my bones, what I'm carrying on an ancestral level. I have an opportunity to work with techniques that I can pass on to my child when his dreams start. So that's the other piece that we haven't gotten into. But our children are having dreams that we had when we were young, and we now know that they're the same ancestral information being passed on that we haven't spoken to them about. But they and we don't live in the same city, and so it's like, okay, we need to do our work so that and that's more of the purpose than it is for me to not have to take a pill to have 8 hours of sleep. 8 hours of sleep is great, but I also, there's other purposes that are being that are being called for us to act upon, that action needs to be taken on, other than just the basic chemical ones. So
you're feeling overwhelmed by all of the not too subtle inequities you're facing every day. Your nights are full of anxiety, and you wake up in the morning feeling like you might as well not have slept at all. What steps might you take beyond just existing that put you in a position to thrive? What might dreaming look like for you if you were given the space to view yourself in a positive light? And how might we influence our dreams toward action in our waking hours? The truth is that we're running into more questions than answers. What's important is that we have the courage to ask.